Okay. Let's go ahead and pray as we start tonight's lesson. Lord, we thank you for all being able to get together. We thank you for the health to do so. We thank you for the blessings that you give us. We also thank you for the trials you give us because they make us stronger and they increase our faith. Even though we don't know always the end from the beginning, but you promise that as we step in faith, you will show us those in the journey. So pray that you would open the word tonight for us so that you would strengthen us, encourage us, teach us, build us into people more like you. And we pray these things in Christ's name. Amen. So, we are in the book of Judges, of course, and we're going to cover the 18th chapter of the book tonight.
The whole thing?
The whole thing. And I want you to keep paying attention to a theme that you're going to see through this book, because this is a story about what's called the Danite migration. And we're going to talk about the tribe of Dan. We're going to go through verses about them so you know who they are. We're going to talk about what their original allotment was. But I want you to see that there are many, many shadows that you're going to see that weave through this, both in the Hebrew words and also just in the actions of a story that are really absolutely satanic in nature. And I think you'll see, hopefully by the end of tonight, how satanic this whole migration was. Not only for their time, but also as a setup for the future, too. So let's read verses 1 through 6 and talk about them. It says, in those days, there was no king in Israel, and in those days, the tribe of Dan was seeking an inheritance for themselves to live in. For until that day, an inheritance had not been allotted to them as a possession among the tribes of Israel. And I'm going to describe to you what that really means when you look more carefully. Verse 2, so the sons of Dan sent from their family 5 men out of their whole number, valiant men from Zorah and Eshtaol. Remember, that's where Samuel was, around Zorah and Eshtaol. Samson was. And it said that they were to spy out the land and to search it. And they said to them, go search the land. And they came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there. You remember the story last week of the house of God, quote unquote, that Micah set up. What an interesting place. Verse 3, when they were near the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young man, the Levite, and they turned aside there, and they said to him, who brought you here? And what are you doing in this place? And what do you have here? And he said to them, thus and so has Micah done to me, and he has hired me, and I have become his priest. And they said to him, inquire of God, please, that we may know whether our way on which we are going will be prosperous. And the priest said to them, go in peace, your way in which you are going has the Lord's approval. Ha, ha. I think you're going to see that that's not true. Now remember, the refrain here again in chapter 1 is, and there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in their own sight. And the refrain of the next chapter, in verse 1, is going to be, and there was no king in Israel, and of course, we talked last week about how many times this is repeated. In other words, there's no central authority, there's no spiritual leadership, and therefore there's corruption and disruption all through Israel at this point. That's really what it means. Now, it's said here that we're talking about the tribe of Dan, and I want you to first go back to the first chapter of Judges, because we made a reference in that very first chapter to the tribe of Dan which is really an important reference, and it's found in Judges 1 in verses 33 and 34. Actually in 34 and 35. So starting at 34, it says, Then the Amorites forced the sons of Dan into the hill country, for they did not allow them to come down into the valley. Yet the Amorites persisted in living in Mount Heres and Ajalon and Shabim, but when the power of the house of Joseph grew stronger, they became forced labor. Now, the point of this verse is that they had access to the coast originally in the territory that God gave them, but they didn't take possession of that area. So they lost their access to the coast. So they were forced up into the hill country, and they became more crowded in the hill country as a result of this. Therefore, they became dissatisfied. But the reason they become dissatisfied is because they don't do what God told them to do. That's the reason why they became dissatisfied. Now, if you look actually well, you don't have to go here, but in Joshua 19, verses 41 through 46, you can write that down if you want to. It talks about the allotment of the tribe of Dan. They're the seventh tribe to get their allotment. Remember, in the book of Joshua, in the last part, he has Joshua and the leaders throw a lot, and he determines where everyone goes. It's God's lot, okay? Matter of fact, if you want to turn, you might want to turn to an interesting psalm that says something about this. Go to Psalm 16. And we'll start in verse 5 of Psalm 16. We're going to read 5 and 6. It says, The Lord is the portion of my inheritance and my cup. Thou dost support my lot. Remember? He's just making reference to the lot of all the tribes. And then he says, The lines have fallen to me in pleasant places. Indeed, my heritage is beautiful to me. In other words, the way God did it was the right way. Everyone was where they were supposed to be. Everyone got the territory that was needed by them. That was the intention. So it was a perfect plan, but the Danites messed the plan up. Now, the Danites are not a small number of people. Go back here, past Judges again, to Numbers, and I want to show you the approximate size of the tribe of Dan. Go to Numbers chapter 26. And we're going to look at verse 43. This is when they take a census, 26 and 43. And all the families of the Shumanites, okay, that's the Danites, their family group. Okay, as a matter of fact, it says before in 42, these are the sons of Dan according to their families of the Shuman, of the family of the Shumanites, etc., etc. So 43, so all the families of the Shumanites, according to those who were numbered of them, were 64,400. Well, if you look around at the other numbers, certainly Judah is the biggest by far, all right? But, you have, for instance, Zebulun has 60,500. They're smaller even than the Danites. So they're not an insignificant group here at all. They've got quite a few individuals in their tribe. Now, the statement is an inheritance had not been allotted them. What this really means is they viewed their allotment as inadequate, because we know that an allotment had occurred and that God had drawn the lot for them. So it was their view that they had gotten an inadequate inheritance because of their failure, not certainly because of God's failure. Now, all through this, you're going to find some words that have some interesting images and shadows to them. The first one is found here. When it says the allotment, okay, it really means, literally, falling by the lot. And the word falling in the Hebrew, there by allotment, is the word nakala. And it refers to something which is falling or falling down or falling backwards or coming down. And it's the root word for the nakash. Who is the nakash? Right. The personage that shows up in Genesis 3, the nakash. So there's a root right there that tells you that there's something about a falling down, a falling away.
Where's the root again?
It's in verse. I'm going to go back now to Judges to show you where it is. It's been allotted, okay, or falling by lot is probably a more literal way to put it. Now, this idea of falling or falling away, or the nakash, you'll see how this will become a theme through this chapter as we go on. So I want you to pay attention to it. So what happens is the Danites send out 5 spies, and they're trying to find a new land that they believe will be adequate for them to live in. So they travel just a little bit to the north to the tribal area of Ephraim. And of course, they find there Micah's, quote, house of God. Now, it's interesting that in Judges, go back, hold your place here and go back to Judges 5. I want to show you something else about the Danites. Another thing we've learned about them that tells us something about their character, their nature. It's in Judges 5. And it's going to be verse 17. This is the Song of Deborah. And of course, it's after that she is called together all these tribal groups to come and to, throw out and deliver the land. And she's kind of the spiritual leader of this delivery. Barak is apparently the general of the delivery. And in verse 17, it says, Gilead remained across the Jordan. So this area of Gilead on the east side of the Jordan didn't come to help them, okay? And it says, why did Dan stay in ships? So they, of course, have access to the seashore and they have seafaring capacity, but they didn't come. They stayed in their area by the Med there. They stayed in their ships. So they didn't show up to help the rest of Israel.
Is that possibly a clue as to why they didn't take access of the land that they were given?
Well, maybe, but of course, eventually they don't have much access to their ships because they lose their coastal area to the Amorites that they don't kick out.
Right.
Yeah, but originally they did have it. If you look at a map, I probably should have put a map of the tribes, but they had an area. I think even where Joppa is today, if I'm not mistaken, is around the area that they had access to the seashore. So, is that okay? Now, so there's another interesting reference to this, seemingly, and to do it, you're going to have to go past Judges again, and you're going to have to go all the way to the Minor Prophets, all the way to the book of Hosea. So you'll go to Hosea, you go after Daniel to Hosea, and I want you to go to Hosea 4. And we're going to look at verses 17 through 19. This is a prophetic statement by the prophet Hosea. It says, Ephraim is joined to idols, let him alone. Where's the house of Micah? This idolatrous house? In Ephraim, okay? And he says, their liquor gone, they play the harlot continuously, their rulers dearly love shame, He says, the wind wraps them in its wings, and they will be ashamed because of their sacrifices. Now, what it alludes to is a couple things. First of all, it alludes to is that Ephraim's going to get theirs, if not before, in 722 BC, when the Assyrians come down and take them into captivity. All right? That's certainly one of the punishments that they're going to receive. But it's an interesting prediction here of the destruction of Ephraim. Now, I want you to turn, since you're in Hosea, you might as well keep going to the right. And I want to show you another verse that has to do with the tribe of Dan. And that's a pretty well-known verse, probably to you, that's in the book of Revelation. And we're going to go to chapter 7 of Revelation. And I want to start in verse 4 of Revelation 7. He says, I heard the number of those that were sealed, 144,000 from every tribe of the sons of Israel. Now think about that. From every tribe of the sons of Israel. Except Dan. Well, except for two, actually. From the tribe of Judah, 12,000. From the tribe of Reuben, 12,000. Tribe of Gad, 12,000. Tribe of Asher, 12,000. Tribe of Naphtali, 12,000. Tribe of Manasseh, 12,000. Tribe of Simeon, 12,000. Now here's the interesting thing. The tribe of Levi. Levi is not normally considered a tribe, but a people. They were given 48 Levitical cities, okay? But it's been substituted apparently for Dan here. So it says the tribe of Levi, 12,000, and from the tribe of Issachar, 12,000, from the tribe of Zebulun, 12,000. And look at the next substitution. The tribe of Joseph for Ephraim. Okay? So we see these two places, that is, the Ephraimites who support this idolatry, and the Danites who create real misery, as we're going to see it go on. They're taken out of this future group of 144,000. Interesting, isn't it? Okay. Now, also, there's another interesting verse about Dan that we want to look at. But let's look first, though. Go back to your left through the New Testament and go to the book of Jeremiah. And there's another interesting reference, allusion here. So go past the prophets, go past Daniel, go past Ezekiel, and go to Jeremiah. And we're going to go to the 8th chapter of Jeremiah. Chapter 8. And we're going to look at verses 16 and 17. Now, notice how enigmatic this is, but we'll try to explain it here in a minute. From Dan is heard the snorting of his horses, at the sound of his neighing of his stallions. The whole world or the whole land quakes. And I think you're going to understand later why the whole land quakes because of this. The whole land quakes, for they come and devour the land in its fullness, the city and its inhabitants. You're going to see how that's fulfilled real quickly. For behold, I'm sending serpents against you. What word do you suppose is used there? Nakash, okay. Adders for which there is no charm, and they will bite you, declares the Lord. Rather enigmatic, isn't it? But somehow it involves the tribe of Dan. Now let's go back, again, since I have to move you back to the other end of the Old Testament completely. Let's go back to Genesis. Here's the original statement in Genesis that's made about Dan. The original prophecy that's made about Dan. And go to chapter 49. The first part of it is easier to understand than the second part of it. So Genesis 49, verse 16 and 17, those two. In 16, it says, Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Well, that one's more clear. Where did Samson come from? Dan. And he was a judge. So there's the fulfillment of that one. But the second one is more enigmatic. Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a horned snake in the path that bites the horse's heels so that his rider falls backward. Now that must be clear to all of you, correct?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. So let's look at this for a minute.
Been there and done that.
Okay. It's an enigmatic allusion to something very dark in their future. I think that's a fair statement to make, even if you don't understand all the words yet. It says that Dan will be like a horned snake. The word there in the Hebrew is shepephon, and what it alludes to in the Hebrew, if we translate it in English, this is called a Cerastes adder, a type of snake. And the Cerastes adder was colored beige, and it hid in the sand of the area, again, the Middle East being very sandy, and when animals would come by, or people, either one, if they got near it, of course, it would jump out of the sand and bite them. And that's what this adder did. Now, it's interesting that it says the rider, if the horse bit, the adder bit the horse, it would, quote, fall backwards. Again, fall, Nephal, where we get the Nephilim, okay? The fallen ones. So again, we see some connections here, some allusions that the decision of the Danites to move begins or sets in motion many evil and very nefarious things. But there's going to be satanic things that come out of this decision. So the 5 spies go to Micah's house. They hear the Levite or priest speak. They hear that he doesn't have an Ephraimite accent. So they say, where are you from? What's your origin? And of course, he explains that he was, quote, searching for work, and that Micah hired him, and of course, he's the priest. Now,
Pretty good elevation for somebody that's looking for work.
yes. Well, he's going to get from his standpoint, even better work real quickly, okay? I don't know that from our standpoint, spiritually, it's going to be better work, but it's going to be, for him, better work. So they ask him, since they hear that he's a priest, whether their plan to travel and find a new home will be successful, and he assures them that they, quote, will have the Lord's approval. Now, let me tell you, this is the equivalent with someone going to a tarot card reader and being assured of God's direction. You're not going to get the Lord's approval or the Lord's speaking through this guy at all. So they get another false prophet who's giving them a false prophecy that's going to lead them in a bad direction, of course. If you would, you were in Jeremiah. I want you to go back towards Jeremiah, and I want you to go to Lamentations. Lamentations, of course, is just after Jeremiah. So go to Lamentations and find it there. A book we, I think, often don't read very much of. Go to chapter 2 of Lamentations. And I think this is an interesting statement by the prophet, which is also Jeremiah, okay? Verse 14, he says, your prophets have seen for you false and foolish visions, and they have not exposed your iniquity so as to restore you from captivity. But they have seen for you false and misleading oracles. This is exactly what this Levite priest gives the Danites. Okay? Now,
Were they intentionally saying lies?
well, I think for many reasons the Levite told them what they wanted to hear. And you're going to see even further why he tells them what they want to hear. So turn back now again to...
Verses in Lamentations 2.
It was verse 14. So, go back to Judges 18, and let's read verses 7 through 13 and discuss them. Then the 5 men departed and came to Laish, and saw the people who were living in security, after the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and secure, for there was no ruler humiliating them for anything in their land, and they were far from the Sidonians, and they had no dealings with anyone. So we're told here that this place of Laish, okay, and we're going to talk about where it existed on a map. This place originally apparently was an outpost of the city of Sidon. Remember in Lebanon, Sidon and Tyre? Mm-hmm. It was an outpost there, but apparently, it didn't have any direct rulership by the Sidonians anymore, so it was kind of left on its own to govern itself, and they lived in peace and prosperity. And then it says, verse 8, when they came back to their brothers at Zorah and Eshtaol, their brothers said to them, "What do you report?" And they said, "Arise and let us go up against them, for we have seen the land, and behold, it is very good. And will you sit here still? Do not delay to go, to enter, to possess the land. When you enter, you shall come to a secure people with a spacious land, for God has given it into your hand, a place where there is no lack of anything that is on the earth." And then, verse 11, then from the family of the Danites, from Zorah and from Eshtaol, 600 men armed with weapons of war set out. And they went up and camped at Kiriath Jearim in Judah. Therefore they called that place Mahana Dan to this day. Behold, it is west of Kiriath Jearim. And they passed from there to the hill country of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah. Back to Micah again. So they travel, the 5 spies travel 100 miles north from the house of Micah. They go to the city of Laish. As we said, it's a peaceful town. It has no treaty issues. It has no real problems. It's a lovely place. And of course, and it's a long distance from Tyre, so in Sidon, so it's not going to get any help if it's attacked. Now we see here also, I believe, another satanic hint in these passages, and I want you to look at it. And that is, I want you to notice where its location is. And again, I probably should have put a map up. Did you? Can you get it up again or not? Okay. I want you to see. I want you to see where the city of Laish is, and it's very far north. So when she gets it up here, okay. Matter of fact, it's man.
Where's your pointer, brother?
It's over there. I can't stretch. So basically, it's going to be about, there it is, right there. The tribe of Dan, you see it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's Laish. Directly north of it, and I mean directly north of it, is Mount Hermon. It is at the foot of Mount Hermon. Okay? And what happened, do we know, at Mount Hermon? An event occurred. It's a very significant event, which is recorded and talked about in Genesis 6.
Oh, the curses and the blessings.
No.
Not her.
What happens at Mount Hermon? Before that, no. What happens? Someone comes down. Who comes down, Michael?
Fallen angel?
Yes. 200 fallen angels come to the earth, and they come and light down or come there. The portal entry is at Mount Hermon. And they start to create this misery that's recorded in Genesis 6. So here's Mount Hermon. Here's the foot of Mount Hermon, where this town is. And then there's another interesting thing. 4 miles to the west is a very important place that you can go to today in Israel called
The gates of hell.
But the city is called,
Kilios?
no, it's called Caesarea Philippi. Okay. Caesarea Philippi. It also has some other names. It's also called Panis, and it's also called Banias.
So the god of Pan was there.
That's why it's called Panis.
Had an altar kind of in a
Grotto.
face.
Yes. There's a cave there, and there's a grotto. And back in ancient times, it was one of the famous oracle sites.
Well, it was fertility.
Yes.
sometime.
And they had their, quote, Sybil type worship. They had the prostitute priestesses who would be there, and you could go there and you could worship with them and pay money, and you could ask a question. In other words, they were mediums. They were always mediums that were there. So this is an interesting place. Now, let's turn, keep your finger there in Judges, but let's look at what Jesus said about it. So turn to the New Testament to Matthew 16. I want you to see how this all pulls together. That's right.
Yeah.
So, Matthew 16, here Jesus is literally standing, and I can't imagine he is not pointing at the grotto right there, historical place of Pan, the demigod, okay? And he's saying you see, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And then he said, and I say to you that you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not overcome it. He's pointing at the grotto because it is an opening spot or a portal of the gate of Hades. Okay? That's why he's there. He's literally challenging Satan in the most in-your-face way he can do it at that point, saying, you think you have power over this earth because of these places. I'm telling you, I'm setting up my church, and it's going to overcome you.
What chapter?
16. So it's a very dramatic thing here that Jesus says.
So then
Okay?
also announces his plan.
Yes.
Well, and it's a place where he chose to finally communicate to the disciples his true identity.
Yes.
So that they, would know and
Yeah.
understand.
What happens in the next chapter?
Well, you've got the,
Yeah.
Transfiguration.
It says that Jesus goes to the highest peak, and he had to go to, there's no place you can go that's close that's a high peak, but
the only place,
it's the only place.
that's a high peak in that area.
Yeah, it is the highest peak. Mount Hermon's big. It's almost 9,000 feet tall.
It's snow-capped.
It is. So the next thing he does is he goes up on Hermon and takes with him a couple of the disciples, and he transfigures. Okay? So it's a very fascinating set of things that happened here. Now, so the 5 spies return from this area. They give a good report, and the Danites decide to send 600 armed men to conquer this area. But on the way, they stop back at the house of Micah. Okay. So back to chapter 18. Let's now read verses 14 through 20. Then the 5 men who went to spy out the country of Laish answered and said to their kinsmen, do you know that there are in their houses an ephod and household idols and a graven image and a molten image? Now therefore consider what you should do. Well, you're going to see real quickly what they consider doing. They figure they got a priest and they've got all these occultic idols, and they're going up north and they're going to take over a city, and they need to set up some sort of religious system there. So they figure, well, we got it all here now. So that's what they are figuring. And he says, and they turned aside there and came to the house of the young man, the Levite, to the house of Micah and asked him of his welfare. And the 600 men armed with their weapons of war, who were of the sons of Dan, stood by the entrance of the gate. Now the 5 men who went to spy out the land went up and entered there and took the graven image and the ephod and the household idols and the molten image, while the priest stood by the entrance of the gate with the 600 men armed with the weapons of war. Verse 18, and when they went into Micah's house and took the graven image and the ephod and the household idols and the molten image, the priest said to them, what are you doing? And they, verse 19, and they said to him, be silent and put your hand over your mouth and come with us and be to us a father and a priest, for it is better for you to be a priest to the house of one man. Is it better for you to be the priest to the house of one man or to be a priest to a tribe and a family in Israel? So, basically, they're saying to the Levite, you're going to get a definite job upgrade real quickly. Okay? Come with us. Instead of this small town area that you're in, with this small town job you have, we're going to give you a very prominent job to a whole tribe of people. So, these spies decide that they need this religious system in their new location, and so they take all the idols and they take the priest. And of course, as it says here, he asks them what they're doing, and they explain that he's going to have a new job title. So it says here that the priest is thrilled with his new position. And remember, where did he come from? He came from Bethlehem, where he was, quote, looking for work. That was his motive. So he found one job at the house of Micah. Now he's finding a better job in his mind with the Danites. And of course, therefore, he takes off and goes with them. Okay? Now, let's read 21 through 31 and finish this. Then they turned and departed and put the little ones and the livestock and the valuables in front of them. And when they'd gone some distance from the house of Micah, the men who were in the houses near Micah's house assembled and overtook the sons of Dan. Verse 23, and they cried to the sons of Dan, who turned around and said to Micah, what is the matter? What's the matter with you that you have assembled together? And he said, you have taken away my gods, which I made, and the priest, and have gone away, and what can I have besides now? So how can you say to me, what is the matter with me? And the sons of Dan said to him, do not let your voice be heard among us, lest fierce men fall upon you, and you lose your life, with the lives of your household too. So the sons of Dan went on their way, and when Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his house. Verse 27, and they took what Micah had made, and the priest who belonged to him, and came to Laish, to a people quiet and secure, and struck them with the edge of the sword, and they burned the city with fire. And there was no one to deliver them, because it was far from Sidon, and they had no dealings with anyone, and it was in the valley which is near Beth Rahab, and they rebuilt the city and lived in it. And they called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan their father, who was born in Israel. However, the name of the city formerly was Laish. And the sons of Dan set up for themselves the graven image, and Jonathan, now you know the Levite's name, okay, the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, he and his sons were priests to the tribe of the Danites until the day of the captivity of the land. So they set up for themselves Micah's graven image, which he had made all the time, all the time that the house of God was at Shiloh. Okay? Now, let's tear this apart. The 600 men and their entourage, they obviously are decided, they know that they're going to be able to conquer Laish, so they bring their family members with them. Okay? So this whole entourage takes off north towards Laish. Micah, of course, finds out what's happened. All this stuff been stolen from him. He tracks them down and yells, and confronts them over the theft. The Danites say at first, "What's your problem?" Okay? He explains what his problem is. And of course, the Danites then state, "Shut up, or the next thing will happen is it's going to cost you your life." So he sees that his position is impossible, and he turns around and goes back home. So the Danites finally come to Laish, this peaceful place, and they commit a genocide. They go in, and with swords and everything, they kill everyone that's in the city. Murder them all. Burn the city to the ground.
Were they Ammonites or?
Yes. Well, of some sort, yes. They were Canaanites of some sort. Doesn't tell us exactly what, but they were. So they end up, taking this place. Why? Because they wanted to take it. Now, an interesting statement I read said the following, and I thought it's worth noting. The ethics of the unsaved are the following. Number one, what is mine, and I'll keep it. Number two, what is yours is mine, and I'll take it. And number three, what is yours I want, so you need to share it with me. And that's, this is what I call the desires of the insatiable self. The self has no limit. The sinful carnal nature of man has no limit. There is no way to satisfy it in the carnal sense. And this is exactly what we see that's behind and in the motive of the Danites and what they do. So the Danites exterminate Laish and its people, and they build there, of course, quote, the city of Dan. Now, their idolatry, as they set up this idol system, seems to grow. And I think it grows to the point of a place that we see in 1 Kings 12. So why don't you hold your place in Judges and go to 1 Kings chapter 12. An interesting history. 1 Kings 12, and we're going to look see, I lost my place here.
It starts in verse 28.
Yeah, 28. Well, we can start in 28 there. All right. So he says, so the king consulted and made 2 golden calves. And he said to them, is it too much for you to go up to Jerusalem? Behold your gods, okay, O Israel, that brought you up out of the land of Egypt. Now, could you be more absolutely satanic than to point out these 2 calves that are golden idols, like the calf that was made when they came out of Egypt, and say, behold your gods who brought you out of Egypt. So he takes one of these 2 and sets it up in Bethel, and it says in verse 29, and he puts the other one at Dan. So we see that there's a religious idolatrous system that occurs that has a lot to do with the city of Dan. Now, it doesn't really end very well for Israel, because in 722, Tiglath-Pileser of Assyria marches into this area and completely wipes out the north and takes them into captivity. And he actually marches, interestingly enough, within 10 miles of Jerusalem and stops and doesn't take Jerusalem and turns around and goes back. And so Judah is saved for another 150 years, as was predicted by the prophets, but the north goes into captivity. Now, in verse 28, back in Judges chapter 18, in verse 28, it indicates that Laish was an original outpost of Sidon But of course, it was too far away to get any help. In verse 30, it states that the priest, also called a Levite, although allegedly he was of the tribe of Judah because he came from Bethlehem, okay? Although, as we said last week, you know, it could be that he actually was a Levite because the displacement, you know, we saw that the people during the time of the judges were not paying attention to the Levitical system whatsoever. They weren't supporting the Levites as God told them they were supposed to do perpetually. And so the Levites now didn't have a source of income. They didn't have, remember, they only had 48 cities. They didn't have land per se. And it could be that they were moving around and this is why he ended up where he ended up. But he's named Jonathan, we see here. And he's called the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh. And of course, he sets up this graven image system here and has his sons as priests also of this idolatrous system.
Well, wasn't Gershom the son of Moses?
Yes, which is something that's going to be very interesting as we're going to look here at the text more carefully. It also states that in verse 30, where is it? Yes, at the end of 30, it says that they were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the captivity of the land. Some people think that this refers to the Syrian invasion in 722. But I think it's more reasonable if you look at the context that what he's really talking about here was the captivity of the Ark of the Covenant, which was taken away. And I'd like you to look at that for a moment. Let's turn to 1 Samuel 4. So turn forward from Judges to 1 Samuel chapter 4. And we're going to look at verses 17 through 22. He says, "Then the one who brought the news answered and said, Israel has fled from the Philistines, and there has also been a great slaughter among the people, and your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of God has been taken." And it came about when he mentioned the ark of God that Eli fell off the seat backward beside the gate, and his neck was broken, and he died. For he was old and heavy, thus he judged Israel 40 years. Notice, it's an interesting statement if you pick up there. Apparently the last judge ultimately was not Samson, but it was actually Eli. Because he says he judged Israel for 40 years. Okay? And of course, it goes on and talks about this occurring, that the glory of Israel was now taken. Matter of fact, you can see a reference to this also if you want to turn to Psalm 78. So turn over to your right to the Psalms and go to chapter 78. And we're going to read starting in verse 59. This kind of a litany of the history of Israel. So 78:59. So when God heard, he was filled with wrath and greatly abhorred Israel, so that he abandoned the dwelling place of Shiloh. This is where the tabernacle existed. Okay? And this is where, obviously, until the Philistines took the ark, this is where it was there. It says, and the tent which he had pitched among men, and gave up his strength, that is a reference to the ark, to captivity, and his glory into the hand of the adversary. So it's another reference here to this event historically that we just read in 1 Samuel 4, where the ark was taken, what many people call the captivity of the land. Now, back to Judges chapter 18, and this verse 30. Verse 30 is extremely interesting. It's really, in the Hebrew, a very complex verse. It's fascinating, and yet it's really enigmatic. And part of the reason why is because in the Hebrew, in this word that can be translated Manasseh, is what is called a hanging nun. And a hanging nun is an element in the Hebrew that, depended on where it sits in the page, it determines what the word means. Yeah, right. Like a hanging chat of days in Florida and elections long ago.
Yeah.
So, depending on where it is placed, it can either mean Manasseh or it can mean Moses. Now, if it means Moses, then it makes sense when it says the son of Gershom, correct? Because it doesn't say that next. The son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh. Now, if it's translated, like I said, Moses, then it makes sense that his son was Gershom. But if the nun is placed a little differently, then it means Manasseh. Rather enigmatic, isn't it? And if it means Manasseh, it can refer to a couple things. Certainly, one of the things is it can be a prophetic image of the future, which may talk about the future king Manasseh. And to look at that, and it could fit in, I want you to turn to 2 Kings 21. Because we're talking about some of the satanic elements of what the Danites do. And I want you to show you how absolutely satanic King Manasseh was. So go to 21. He was pretty bad. So we're going to read verses 2 through 7. 2 Kings 21. It says, he did evil in the sight of the Lord, according to the abominations of the nations, whom the Lord dispossessed before the sons of Israel. For he built the high places which Hezekiah's father had destroyed, and he erected altars for Baal, and made Ashtoreth, as Ahab king of Israel had done, and he worshipped all of the host of heaven and served them. He worshipped the host of heaven and served them. Who were the host of heaven? Yes, the fallen angels. That's the host of heaven. That's why, if you'll go all the way back to the 10th chapter of Genesis, this guy named Nimrod built a tower and inscribed on it a place, an astrological site that could access for the earth the host of heaven, which is why Babylon translated means not the gate of the God, but it means the gate of the gods, plural. Interesting. Now, go on here. It gets worse. And it says he built altars in the house of the Lord, in which the Lord had said, in Jerusalem I will put my name. Verse 5, where he built altars for all the hosts of heaven. Do you see how occultic this is? In the two courts of the house of the Lord. He's literally building occultic altars to worship the demigods in the house of the Lord. Okay? And it says, and he made his sons pass through the fire, that is, Moloch worship, okay? Practiced witchcraft, used divination, dealt with mediums and spiritists, and he did much evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking the Lord to anger. And then he set the carved image of the Ashtoreth that he had made in the house, of which the Lord said to David and to his son Solomon, in this house and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen for all the tribes of Israel, I will put my name forever. This guy is about as satanic as you can get. Okay? And of course, his name is what? Manasseh. Manasseh. So, now, there's also another possible interesting allusion to satanic consequences of the Danite migration. Now, when they moved north, they increasingly connect with the maritime traders. Remember, originally they were maritime people before they lost their ability to go to the coast. So they were actually originally used to ships. They apparently moved somewhat to the west, and of course, where do they go? To this area today we call Lebanon. They're very close to it. And of course, they meet these people called the Phoenicians, who probably are some of the greatest maritime sailors ever in the world. The more we look at archaeological things, the more we see evidence that the Phoenicians literally were almost everywhere. As a matter of fact, in England, yes, we found in this place in Salem, New Hampshire, okay, a stone that was discovered at this place that we call the Stonehenge of America. We've been there. You can go and sit there, and in their in a case in their property, there's a stone, and it has an inscription on it. And for years and years and years, no one could ever figure out what it was or what the letters meant. So finally, they called in this Harvard language expert about maybe 10 or so years ago, and they showed him this stone, and they said, "Do you have any idea what it means?" And he says, "Yes, I know what it means." And they said, "How?" And he says, "It's Phoenician." "What does it mean?" It says they're honoring the great god Baal. Of course, the Phoenicians worship. Where do they find this thing? In Salem? In Salem. No, it's in Salem, Mass. That's right. Yeah. Okay.
That's where Elizabeth Warren's from.
That's true. That's where the Salem witch trials occurred, and I'm going to tell you. No, it is New Hampshire. It's in the corner there. Yeah, it's in the corner of New Hampshire there. Yeah. Now.
It's not very far from Mass.
No, it's real close. It's probably 40 miles from Boston, ish. Yeah.
Or less.
Now, so there is connection. So the Phoenicians are literally unbelievable maritime sailors. They trade all over. They go explore all over the world. And the sons of Dan and their ships actually intermarry with them. And they also become maritime traders. Now, the Phoenician descendants who moved eventually to Eastern Europe and to the Balkans have a very interesting genetic element as we've studied their genetic codes. We found that 47% of people in this area have what's called a genetic haploid segment called, and you'll want to know this to remember it, it's called E1B1BY. Okay? It's this gene segment. And this segment is unique, and it comes from the father side, and it's found in 47% of people that were of Phoenician descent. Okay? Now, the thing that's really interesting is that the same haploid segment is found also in this area called the Peloponnese region, which of course is an area of Greece. And they also have about 47% of them. Also, they found this segment in these individuals. Now, the area of the Peloponnese region contained what was called the Daunian kings. And they are cited multiple times in Homer's Iliad, where they are said, it is said of them that they originated, according to Homer, from the tribe of Danae, D-A-N-A-E. And he said, Homer, that they were the grandchildren to Belus, the god Belus. Who is Belus? Belus is another word for Baal. Belus, though, specifically, was the Phoenician word for Baal. So the connection here also to the Phoenicians, again. Now, it says that they originally, in the Iliad, they exiled from Egypt, and in one Daunian king chamber, we have also found a bronze bas-relief in there. I forget which museum it's in now, but guess what it's a picture of, the bas-relief. The children of Israel crossing the Red Sea. Now you go, why would that be in a Greek king's tomb? Interesting, isn't it? Okay? So, we find also in Eastern Europe, in many of the Eastern European Jews, we have the same high percentage of this haploid, segment. And actually, we find it in this thing we call the Cohen Jewish groups, Cohen, Jewish groups, which they trace their lineage, interestingly, to the tribes of Ephraim, Manasseh, and Levi through their paternal DNA. Of course, Levi's first son was Gershom. And of course, mentioned also is Manasseh. Interesting, isn't it? So, the Danaan Greek kings eventually intermarry later with another group of people called the House of Flavius. Do you know who the House of Flavius was? These were the Romans that the Caesars first came from. So the Danaan kings intermarry with the House of Flavius. So now you have a combination in Rome and in the Caesars, this Greek genetic heritage, which really is Semitic genetic heritage, with this Roman genetic heritage. And it's why many people, I believe, and I'm not going into this all tonight, but many people believe that Antichrist will be a descendant from these people because of the Danite connection. So, the story of the Danite migration has many, many implications, many satanic implications, and even implications potentially for our future as we get to the end of the age here. Okay? All right. So, let's go ahead and shut this down with a prayer. And Anna, would you close us with prayer tonight?
Lord, thank you for this time. So we can get together and study your word peacefully, and you have so much in it. We just thank you for that there's always something new to learn. Please put your protection upon us and upcoming week, and take care of us, Lord, and we thank you and we love you and we pray in the name of our Savior, Jesus Christ.
Amen.